Welcome. I'm Rogers Anderson, Williamson County Mayor, and today I have the distinct pleasure of talking to not only our sheriff but a friend, Jeff Long. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Mayor. Always good to be with you, and I always enjoy this.
So, you know, we've done this show several times. People know who you are and the great job that you and your men and women do out at for the sheriff throughout the county. But talk to us a little bit about Jeff, the individual. How in the world did you ever get excited about being in law enforcement? I know you've got a stellar history. You've been different organizations, but kind of just, I won't say go all the way back to the birth, but where you're born in West Tennessee, and bring us forward. How do you get involved in it?
Well, I was born in Jackson, Tennessee, actually raised in Decatur County in Parsons. My mother always thought when I was going to college I was going to be a Methodist preacher. So I went off the path for a while apparently. But anyway, was in a local rescue squad and got to riding with some of the deputies in my home county and really enjoyed it. And I thought, this is what I want to do. And so then I decided I wanted to be a TBI agent, what my goal was. So got started in law enforcement. I think I counted the other day, I've got 41 years now. So started in local enforcement and have been very blessed through my career. I've worked all three levels, local, state, and federal. As you know, I spent 14 years with the TBI. Also, while during that time, was able to get my law degree and ended up going to the district attorney's office, prosecute for 10 years, and then the office of sheriff here was open at that time, and got some people that came to me and wanted to know about running, and we talked about it, and probably the best decision I ever made. I've been so blessed to have had the opportunity to be the sheriff here in, I think, the greatest county in the world.
I know along the way you met a wonderful woman, and out of that came some okay kids, as we say, but you got those super grandchildren now, and I don't mean your kids aren't good. It's kind of like mine. I hardly ever introduce them anymore once the grandkids are around.
Well, that's what everybody says. You know, the grandkids are they can come and play and go home. Well, we don't want them to go home. That's the thing. Yeah, the parents can go home, but we'll keep the grandkids. We're very fortunate. We got 4. We got a girl and 3 boys. And, of course, Julie and Justin are my children. They live here. And you're talking about my wife, Dora. Of course, everywhere we go, I'm known as Mr. Dora. She's more known across this county than I am. Spent years and years at Bethesda Elementary and Oakview Elementary, and ended up retiring from the school system and just babysit our grandkids. So she does that every day, and she's been the light of my life for 41 years.
That's a long time. And quite frankly, I think she's probably got you more trained than you've got her trained.
I don't think there's any doubt about that.
So let's talk about the men and women that are out at the Sheriff's Department. What a wonderful, stellar group you got here just in the last 30 days. You always have a Christmas function in which you have noteworthy events for your law enforcement people and the volunteers too. But one of the things that's always so touching every year, and you hate to say it this way, those men and women that decided to hang up their cleats. They're ready to go out and enjoy life. They put in stellar careers, and
Absolutely.
You had that. The total workforce, I'm not sure what the number is. You probably know. It's an enormous amount of people that are protecting our community.
We're right at 276 as our numbers. And dedicated men and women who put their lives on the line every day for our citizens. I am so proud of them. I think I've got the greatest staff in the world. It actually, I told them not long ago, I wanted to remind them they're the ones that do the work. They are the ones that should be getting the accolades that I go out in the public and get to receive for them. And that's an honor for me to get to receive those accolades for those people who work so hard. At this award ceremony we had Christmas, Sergeant James Graves, who had been with us for 32 years, I believe it was, retired, and we rewarded him with that and honored him during that. And one of the other things that we had this time we had not had before was a heroism award, which I thought was really touching. We had a young girl who was seriously injured in an automobile accident here and was trapped in her vehicle. Real severe head injuries, and some of our deputies climbed into the vehicle and held her head while she was being extricated from the car, and then carried on to the hospital. And she came and presented that officer, who she had not seen since that injury. She and her mother came and presented him the award, and that was probably the most rewarding thing I've seen at our award ceremonies.
You know, as you reflect on your career, not that it's over, but that your career that you've had at this point in your life, and we've seen the way Williamson County has continued to grow. We're one of the fastest growing counties, but in the unincorporated area, we're pretty stable in our growth. You get some annexation, pull those numbers in the stability market, but when you think about your department also has to handle all the real bad folks, and we put them in the jail. The cities don't have a jail, and all of their bookings, all of their arrests that require jail time are going to have to come down on Century Court, where the jail's located. So that's a whole different division than most law enforcement communities inside cities, except for metropolitan, have to deal with. And that in itself is something that a lot of people just do not realize. As our community has grown over the last certainly 10 to 15 years, more people result in more arrests, more jail time. And it's not just the male population anymore. Talk a little bit about our jail. It's nearly a 30-year-old jail. You're holding it together oftentimes with duct tape, because it's gotten to the point that we've just got to look at some of those avenues, and how do we provide the continued police protection, but that also kills jail time.
Yeah. We have right at 100 of our deputies who are assigned to the detention division, running and operating the jail. Our jail is a 454-bed jail. That's a little bit of a misnomer, because you have to do some segregation by conviction, non-conviction, male, female, sentenced, unsentenced, felony, misdemeanor. So it's not really 454 beds. But original was built in 1989, and then a pod or so was added on in 1998. So yeah, we're looking at some problems. Some of the locking mechanisms that were installed in '89 are no longer produced, and so we're having to call some of the other facilities across the state that are building new facilities and see if they have those doors, and if they do, ask them to let us have the locking mechanisms to keep it operating and everything. But population grows, expense, that's probably the biggest expense that we have, is operating that jail. The medical cost alone on the inmates is our highest expense we have. We have to provide mental and physical and dental care, and so the expense of that, feeding the inmates, it's a huge expense. And as you said, all of the different cities and municipalities in our county, the state agencies, the Highway Patrol, Wildlife Resources, TBI, anybody that's arrested on a state charge serves their sentence and booked into our jail.
And oftentimes people think, well, if you get a state prisoner, you just get reimbursed for it.
Well, that's not the case at all. It costs more to house them than what you might get from the state. And it's pretty well a set pattern now that if somebody has an 8-year sentence or less, they're probably going to serve it in the county jail. As you know, the prison population, hadn't built a lot of new prisons, and the state hadn't accepted that responsibility, and so we have no choice but to keep them here. We have a pretty good relationship with the Department of Corrections, where if we have inmates that we really need to get out of the facility, they're good to us, and we'll accept those, and we get on a routine basis. But we're not terribly overcrowded. So because of that, we're down on the rotation probably a little less than some of the other counties who are overpopulated.
So 5 years ago, 2010, that we had a flood that came to our community, May of that year, and something that none of us had ever seen, experienced before in our entire lives. Certainly myself, I would not speak for you. Nashville got hit a lot worse than we did, mainly because of the river up there, the flooding, the water. But we certainly had our share of it here in Middle Tennessee, and certainly in the Williamson County and areas from here to Leapers Fork and Hillsborough area and Fairview. The old Harpeth began to swell, and water came out of the banks, and it settled in places that I don't know that I ever knew that water could be stored in for a temporary basis there for about 5 days and really longer. I've heard you say over and over and over that was a very trying time in your personal career because of the things that were needed we just didn't have.
Well, as you said, it's a first, and we hadn't been prepared for that. I remember you and I riding around and looking at the damage and some of the areas, and the bad thing for us is people were calling, but we couldn't respond. We couldn't get to them. I mean, you go one direction, the road was blocked. You go another direction, the road's blocked. Water over the road, and that was very trying. And I think part of the problem in that flood too was the water came up so quick.
Correct.
I know I was in Leapers Fork. We had a display of, I don't remember now, it's $7 to $10 million worth of guitars in Leapers Fork, and I was there during the rain, and I got it flooded so quick. I actually called Dora, my wife, and I said, I'm not going to get out. It'd probably be Monday or so before I get out. And luckily it did go down enough that day that I could get out the back side. But how quick that came up. And I was there on a rescue. There was a lady that had to climb up into a tree because she was feeding her horses, and the water came up so quick, she got flooded in the pasture. And the only thing she had to do was climb up in a tree. And I was getting phone calls that she needed to be rescued, and we didn't have anything to get out to rescue her with other than putting people's lives at risk by tying off of ropes and physically wading out into the water. And so that's what we did to rescue her, and that hit me pretty hard that day. And I think you and I had some conversations. I looked you in the eye and I said, Mayor, I will promise you that Williamson County will be prepared from now on. We will have the equipment we need from now on to do that.
Well, and I think that's the point we're getting at. Overall, I go back over the years, my relationship with you and the things that you've been able to accomplish. My part of it is oftentimes just do a little steering of the money. The direction of our sheriff's department and what you bring to the table is through your men and women. But at the end of the day, it's that man that leads the charge, or woman that leads the charge, that says these are the things we got to do to protect our county, protect our borders. We hear that all the time now. But we've added quite a few vehicles. We've expanded programs such as the SRO, Student Resource Officers. They're in every school, Sheriff.
Which is very unusual. Most school systems in our state don't have that luxury of having a school resource officer in every school, and we're very blessed to get to do that, and I think it's just a very important program. We're affecting the lives of young people that normally would not have that positive contact or that positive image of a police officer, and they get that early in school, and I think we'll see the effects of that for a long, long time. And I just know my thought on it is that I know that school is protected in the event there was an emergency or a situation. We're seeing it all across the country, and unfortunately more and more. And we get prepared for that. I mean, we have training around the clock trying to get prepared for any incident that might happen.
And if I could interrupt you, it's a different type of training than you can just take a law enforcement person that's gone through. There's special training.
Absolutely, yeah. And the techniques have even changed now from what it used to be. Back in the Columbine situation, you always waited for a SWAT team to arrive. Now the theory is you don't do that. First 2 or 3 people there go in the door. So the techniques have changed, the capabilities have changed, the weapons you need, the equipment you need has changed, and we're very blessed to be in Williamson County because we're able to get that equipment through the commission and you, and we're very thankful for how blessed we are to have the equipment to protect our officers for doing that. On some of the property for the flood and everything, we've recovered about $2 million so far in federal property. I'm talking about trucks, boats, different things that we can use in different situations that were free to our community other than us paying the expense to get it here, going and getting gas for it and driving it back or having it hauled. We have a swiftwater rescue team now that's fully trained who just went to South Carolina during the recent flood up there to help out, and so we've got a lot free property that we'll utilize on all events, and we have utilized it on several events.
When you think about the equipment that you've been able to amaze and your working relationship with other agencies, and a lot of people need to understand you have jurisdiction in the entire county, but the cities have their police chief, chief in each one of our cities, the ones that have them, Brentwood and Franklin certainly. There has to be collaboration that goes on between these departments for this county to be protected the way it needs to be protected.
Absolutely. None of us have the staff that can totally protect it, and that's why we have such a great relationship with our municipality partners. We have meetings with them, and we all know that we need each other in order to an emergency that might happen, and we train together, and we have understandings of who will have primary on certain incidents and who will be the backup. And I can promise you, though, if there's an event in this community, I would say that every agency in this county will be responding if we have one.
And I like to think, and I tell my counterpeers, the other mayors, the county mayors and city mayors outside of Williamson County, that one of the things that has been developed over the last several years is that we indeed have mechanisms and equipment and manpower and womanpower to protect our citizens. Would everything go perfect? Probably not. But the fact of the matter of it is, this commission, aldermen, I would like the residents to know that they're about as safe as we can get, and every day it takes more equipment, more dollars in which to do that. Probably could get on the national scene, and that same argument could be said or not said, but I truly believe Williamson County can protect its borders and take care of them.
Oh, I think we can, yes.
We're not building a militia, we're just simply protecting the people. And today's climate, I mean, just recently the commission saw fit to allow you to take some equipment in from a county south of here in a helicopter that we'll see how it works for the next year or two. But I suspect, I would love to say we never have to use it, but I have a funny feeling there are going to be events that come up that we've got to use that thing.
Well, we did thank the commission for that approval and letting us have this to see. We will have a aviation unit. The aviation unit will be used on various activities that we think we need it for. This community is growing so fast. We look at every tool that we think we need or can be available to assure our citizens that they're protected. And this is another way of doing that. The good thing about this, they're free. The helicopters we're getting are free through the federal surplus program again. We have a reserve deputy sheriff who is a pilot, who owns his own helicopter company, who is going to train our personnel free. He will be able to certify them as pilots free. With the aviation equipment, we're also getting some fuel that will keep us from having to buy fuel the first year. We're getting a tanker truck that will be used to service the helicopters. So it seems like that everything is falling into place, that this is the right time to do it. I thought long and hard about this. I never thought when I ran for sheriff that I'd ever think we needed a helicopter, but I never thought also that Williamson County would grow the way it has and as quick as it has. And everybody that travels across our community knows it's tough to get from one side of the county to the other in a quick manner with all the traffic we have. So we think that the rate of growth that we're having, and projected rate of growth especially, I'm looking at for down the road for the next years, this is the right time to do it and be prepared for it.
Well, and I sat here and I think back 4 or 5 years ago during that flood, at that same time we had a task force put together, had some 45 or 50 different agencies and people represented, and we needed a new building. We needed a location in which in the event we had another flood, we had a tornado, or just some other event that falls within the realm of law enforcement and public safety, there's something that we could guarantee our citizens, that we could command or could have a command post and run. Because you got to remember, emergency management is also involves city folks.
Absolutely.
And emergency management director that we have in Mac Purdy during those huge calamities that you have, you got to have someone in charge, because you've got your job to do with the law enforcement piece, but somebody's got to coordinate and all that. You will have a presence there. I mean, your arms, your extent of oversight is not just the law enforcement issuing tickets in the jail. It extends to the public safety of all of Williamson County. It also extends down to the court system that we often take for granted. I don't know how you get around to doing everything, but it's an amazing job of the way the sheriff's title, and everybody thinks they know what a sheriff does. You're very recognized, you're very well thought out, but at the end of the day, you're still measured by results, and your results are pretty good.
Well, as I said, it goes back to the personnel. I'm so blessed, I think, to have the personnel that we have, and they're the ones that do the job. And you know, as you're talking about the court system, it's the same problem there as it is at the schools, as it is with traffic, as it is with everything else. The population growing, the number of cases being filed are growing, the number of arrests are growing. So we're sort of seeing that expansion all across every aspect that we have at the sheriff's office of trying to manage this, manage this, manage this, and still try to do it as physically responsible as we possibly can.
And a few years ago, 15, 20 years ago, we really began to see this population growth in our schools. The school growth also results in juvenile areas of concern. I'll use it that way.
Yes.
And that may be one of the largest growth patterns we're seeing.
Wouldn't doubt that being true. I know Judge Guffey has talked about her court and juvenile services, about how much it's expanding. It has, because I mean, we see it. So I wouldn't doubt that's true. It's gotten so big, of course, the system and everything, that we now have a investigator in our criminal investigation division pretty well just assigned to work cases in the schools. So that's about all he has time to do, is work those cases in schools of theft of computers, iPods, different types of things that happen in our school system. And it has expanded the juvenile capabilities in juvenile court.
Sheriff, we oftentimes fail to realize you need good men and women too. And I've heard your staff talk about there's always room for good men and women. So if there are moms and dads, grandparents watching the show, what are you looking for in these men and women, future hires that you've got?
Well, first of all, I'm looking for someone who wants to dedicate their life and their career to the public. You got to be a good public servant, I think, in order to be in our business. I'm looking for someone who cares, has a kind heart, can be stern, but also a lot of people right now are looking at law enforcement with a jaundiced eye, and our opportunity to recruit is probably not as solid as it was for a while, because young people see the news media accounts and begin to question whether they want to get in this profession or not. I've got to remind the public, those are isolated incidents. If you look at the total number of officers across this country and you look at those incidents, you're talking a minute number. We are so blessed that the people that we hire, we start everybody that comes to work with us pretty well in the detention center. And that's a couple of reasons I do that. One is it gives us that period of time to evaluate that employee, to make sure that's an employee who can really handle it out on the road or in a school or something like that. But also more important, I think, is that unfortunately a lot of our customers in the jail are repeat offenders. So it gives that new deputy an opportunity to meet that defendant in a controlled environment and know the actions of that defendant and know how he's going to act and what his reactions are, and also it allows that defendant to know how the officer's going to react. So it's a good training area for that, and so that's one of the reasons we do that. But I would encourage anybody, if they have somebody interested in applying, contact our office, get one of the county applications, get it submitted, and we'll get them in. And we do physical agility testing. We do a psychological evaluation. We do a physical examination. And multiple interviews. So it's a lengthy process, but It's very, very rewarding as a career.
So you look out into the crystal ball of 5 to 10 years. How do you see law enforcement changing?
Oh man, I think it'll change as much as it has in the last 5 to 10 years, which has been tremendous, especially here in our community with the projections of how fast we're going to grow in population. You know, we're looking at things that we've never had to look at in the past because of our growth. I mean, a lot of people, and I try to educate a lot of the people when I go out and speak, or even our county commission. You know, we've all worked the traditional crimes. I say the traditional crimes. I'm talking about the homicides, the robberies, the rapes, the burglaries and things. We've been doing that for years. But as far as terroristic threats and things like that, that's a new thing that law enforcement is learning about. And we're having to do that. As you bring worldwide companies into our communities, those concerns of security issues are ours. And that's to me, is an awesome responsibility that the chiefs of police and I have of making sure that we protect that interest of these people who are moving into our communities. So I think the next 5 to 10 years is going to be as big a challenge or bigger than what we have faced in the last 5 to 10.
I think it's important that you touched upon these large corporations that are moving into our areas in the last couple of minutes we've got left. Cybersecurity was not something 15 years ago I was really concerned with. Yeah. Today I'm very concerned with.
Absolutely.
Not only in our operation that we run here in the county, but it's a whole different area, and it takes a different mindset and actually a different skill set for the men and women to be able to do that. I'm certainly not the person that can figure out cybersecurity. I'm still trying to understand how do you go to the off button to turn the computer on. I'm not sure who.
I'm with you.
Who invented that idea. But the point of the matter is, your industry and law enforcement is going to change, and it's going to change drastically. And the reason that we're talking about good men and women, there's a place out there for that young man, that young woman that's got those skill sets. It's going to be incredible.
Yeah, it used to where we'd look for criminal justice degrees. We also look at that, but also we're now looking at technology degrees, things like that, people who can do the technology. We're very, very blessed. As you know, we have a cooperative agreement with Nissan North America where they provide their forensic analysis team who does forensics on computers and things, and they have given those people to us on a basis so many hours per week and give us the equipment for a laboratory to where we can work those kind of crimes, and we would not be able to do that, the amount of cost it takes to work those, especially the lab part, without that.
Well, we've run out of time. Could make it a good hour with you. You make it easy to interview. I appreciate what you do for our community and our county. This is your sheriff. This is my sheriff, Jeff Long, and it's been my pleasure to be able to talk to him. Thanks for coming.
Thank you again.
Have a good day. I'm Rogers Anderson. We'll be back with you around the county with another guest.